with the skin tones of this guy, maybe opposed to a more classic approach of yeah, more natural suntanned skin tones. And with this one, the inspiration was maybe Frankfurt Zeta or some of the other fantasy artists. And yeah, the idea was to do a more greenish approach to skin. Again, I like to experiment and do something different, even though this is more like a corn figure. Obviously, I just wanted to try something new and yeah, just mix it up. And you know, it's just my approach of trying to do something interesting, try something new, and not to always do the same thing. So keep in mind that this is in fact a miniature that was supposed to go to a golden demon and probably will in the future, so the skin tones took a bit more time to paint. It's a more controlled approach as opposite to something that we would, you know, maybe paint for enjoyment, for just a quick paint job. That's why I'm going to and from shadows to highlights and midtones again, just to get a smooth result, but still keep the contrast high. We're doing a few steps and then we're going back to the shadows and then go back to midtone and then add the highlights, but you will see. So yeah, enjoy the video. If you have any questions, as always, let me know. I want to start with some German green, German uniform green. So this is going to be my base color. It looks a lot more green in reality than on the palette and the camera, but when mixing in colors, I have the experience that it's going to look pretty interesting. So just in case everything is a tiny bit too cold, I have some sepia here, that always makes for a bit of an interesting color. And then a bit of an experiment. I don't know if that is too dark maybe, but I also have some beige red that are already used on the other Blood Reaver that I painted. So this is just in case I need a midtone. Okay, so my desaturated colors are going to be some tar brown, maybe some English uniform. Yeah, just in case. I'm just going to, like always, put out a few more colors that I might need than I might need. Base color wise, like I said, I definitely want to use the German green. I don't want to start too dark. Okay, I think that could look interesting. Still a bit on the dark side, but if it's too dark, I'm just going to go over the whole thing with a lighter tone. I don't usually paint with washes a lot. I just treat them usually as normal paints, and if I want to paint with a wash, then I usually just mix them myself. I don't necessarily use washes that come labeled as washes directly as washes, if that makes sense. And also in general, I don't really like to shade with washes or stuff like that. Don't limit yourself to what people say is, you know, classical painting. So use washes for this and that, or use, you know, or that you have to use, for example, base, where is it, base colors. So if it says base color right here, you can also of course use it to glaze or layer or whatever. You don't have to follow the traditional uses for colors. You can always experiment. It's a good thing to experiment with your painting. And yeah, I wish, like I often say it, I wish I had that drive to experiment in the beginning. Then I would have learned a lot faster and a lot more during the time that I was just doing exactly that. So yeah, you can basically do whatever you want with painting. Don't limit yourself. But yeah, for beginners, the washes, if you want to paint with washes, and for example, if you are not really aiming at showcase painting, if you want to paint your armies in a quick way, then definitely go for it. But I would say experiment with your own washes first, and then decide whether or not you have to pick up an actual wash, because they're not really cheap. But letting the wash decide where to go takes control of the paint job out of your hands. Yeah, exactly. Because when you are trying to paint for a showcase, you kind of want to be in control of where your lights go and so on. Okay, I feel like adding a scale color to another color does exactly nothing. But the tar brown is one of my go-to colors when doing muted skin tones, so we will see. The goal has to be here to establish the light and dark situation, so just look at your miniature from above and treat all the areas that face upwards like areas that would catch a lot of light, and everything that you can't see should probably stay in the dark. And as you can see, the color takes an interesting turn already. You can definitely see a shift in color. And the slightly yellow tone of the tar brown just adds to that whole zenithal lightning effect. And I'm also using a layering thickness for the paint. You definitely want these initial layers to cover in one pass if possible. However, I don't go too far ahead. I mix in about maybe 50-50, just so that you can see a change in lightness, but also there's not a huge step from the base color to the first highlight color, so that the transitions don't get too Now, a common mistake that I see when people do the initial light situation is they focus too much on how the sculpt looks, and especially on the forearm here, we can see that there is 2 separate or even 3 separate muscle groups. But however, you don't want to separate these too much with a dark line, because this is still a situation where most of the forearm will be really light. We can distinguish them a little bit, but you should still treat all of this as a single entity for the first layers. Now turning it around, we're doing the same for the shoulders. The back here is a little bent inwards as we move down because of the pose that the figure has. And yeah, we're focusing mostly on the upper shoulders, but since this is our initial highlight, I'm also fading out the color toward the arch of the back, but still focusing most of the light on the top area. So basically I'm just sketching in all the light now. I'm leaving a few areas to be shaded, but overall I want the whole thing a bit lighter. Well, drastically lighter than the base color. So we'll see. Maybe once I'm done with everything, maybe I have to glaze in a few midtones more. But yeah, again, I'm just experimenting. I always try with every miniature. I try to try something new. To try something new. All right. Maybe put a few glazes on the mid areas here, so that we don't have too sharp transitions. Here I want an actual sharp transition because that's the way it's sculpted. So that's okay. Okay, so let's try. I'm going to add the screen. I want to see if that makes it any lighter or if it's just tinting. So the next thing that we have to do is gradually build up the light and covering less and less area. You can see that there's some features on the sculpt in the chest muscles that I want to leave out, that I want to later define with another color. And then moving down towards the abs, we kind of focus on the upper edges now, really defining the upper areas, the upper half of these round shapes. So up here I'm just covering most of that area, since we want that light anyway. And if you're unsure about what should catch light, just look at it from above, and then everything that faces you directly should probably be covered by light. bring back just the tiniest hint of pink for the last steps, and then go directly into highlighting. Okay, I definitely need some areas to look a bit different, so let's see. I think I'm going to go straight for, let's get some sepia in here. For example, the elbow, I'm definitely going to tint a reddish pink right now. So the sepia tint is a bit of a brown color and tints the more pink skin color a browner hue. And I feel like the less pink you have on your things, the better. You know, unless it's like a pink horror or something like that. But I try to stay away from straightforward pinks. Okay, the elbow. Also this elbow. So right now I feel a bit like this with the reddish pink blended in there. Looks a bit like a Frazetta painting, because what he did pretty good was mix warm colors with cold colors as highlights. So that could be something that I might want to try here. It's actually not a bad idea. Let's just go for that. Can always paint over the whole thing again if it doesn't work. So I'm just adding the beige red mixed with a sepia to the midtones. And let me stress that again, usually when I glaze in colors like this, then I typically mix them with a bit of the base color so that the difference in hues is not too large, and so that it fits better with the area that it should tint a bit. Okay, so I'm going to add more of that, kind of from below, so that the highlights are still cold with that green. So just tinting a few of the shadows too. I'm having a feeling this might not be Games Workshop appropriate, but that color just found me. So let's run with it. Okay, so just adding a bit more of that sepia and adding it to the darker areas, kind of using it as a dark line. Wait, to the areas that are further below, I meant to say. And use it as a dark line color. Yeah, I really like the contrast that's building here. Just repairing a bit of that, just glazing over the pink with the green from time to time, where I feel like we lost a bit of that green tint and where I just want to bring it back. Okay, let's add some light. Just want to also touch the sternum, as always. And moving forward from here, it's going to be a bit of a back and forth between shading and highlighting. So here I'm starting to bring back out the mid-tone highlights again with some of the Nurgling green, just to clean everything up after the glazes. The thing is, I did use, and it's quite funny, I did use an equivalent of Nurgling Green, Dead Flesh. Yeah, but unfortunately that color dried in, or almost dried in. Let's see, maybe I can get some of it out. But yeah, I also used that color on Bergenscheigo. Yeah, I should probably try to get that color tone again, because it's a really good tone and I really enjoyed painting with it. But for some reason it just died during the last 2 months. Yeah, actually, yeah, I like that color even better as a highlight color. So let's see. Right, so just glazing on the highlights with the Dead Flesh carefully. Right, just adding a few lines here to mimic a rough elbow texture. Now adding some white as a highlight color, and as you know, I rarely use pure white, so I'm mixing in some of the Dead Flesh. Focusing on the exposed areas. Okay, don't want to overdo the highlights. Just carefully glazing them on. I'm just using a general Senator light for this. Yeah, so just adding the highlight color to some muscle groups up here and leaving, for example, I'm leaving this line out as good as I can to have a bit of variation in the areas that are, how would you call them, more monotonous, and the bigger areas, to also create some interesting features there. That's always something you can try to do to make your miniatures more interesting. Yeah, I think I might be adding more of that red to the darker areas. So I feel like when you look at it this way, it feels a bit not enough contrast. That makes sense. from the top it looks good, but that's because the white increases the darkness here. I guess you can see it in a good way. So I have a lot of white from above, or well, a lighter color from above, and therefore the dark color is increased. But as I turn it around and the colors don't really change, this color is still the same base color, but you don't have as many whites in there, and therefore the contrast decreases. So a bit of an interesting effect. So I have to put a lot more darker colors into this area still. Okay, just putting some emphasis on the knuckles. And also the back of the hand. See, I just want to, since I have the color mixed, just want to add some lighter reflections. Well, not reflections, but highlights. Of course, covering less and less area. Okay, I mustn't forget the back, as I always do. Have a bit of the pink in there, as you can see, and I'm toning down these parts because those are not actually deep muscles, or deep yeah, muscle grooves or whatever you would call them. And this could technically be considered as like an arm that would, as you can see, that would catch a lot of light, and you don't actually see these parts that much as I turn it around a bit, but when it's hit by light there's not that much of distinction. So toning that down a bit. I just want to, for the sake of experimenting, mix in a bit of white and just put some highlights where it should be the lightest, just as a reference. So here, then I'm going to hit this, and just to see how light I can still go, or how light I should go. Or maybe this is already enough. So just the collarbone, for example, just the tiniest dot of white. Oh well, it's actually not white, but it's still white mixed with the last highlight color. But that's just yeah, an easy trick. Just like with the what I showed with turning it around and increasing contrast that way. Just placing a lighter dot next to some darker areas just increases contrast by so much. And contrast usually helps with getting the attention of, for example, judges, or just making your piece look good on the table. There's the focus. So I'm just adding these white dots that we added everywhere. Also on the elbow. Details. And everything that could even slightly resemble an edge and would be catching on some light, also putting some white on that. Or for example, anything that is a sphere, you also want to highlight that. And yeah, just gradually building contrast, and like I said, eventually I'm going back and I'm going to be shading some areas. And let me just fix that. Okay, so the backside still needs some treatment. I'm just doing the same thing, gradually building the light where it would catch on. I'm covering less area, obviously, than before. And something that works quite good is highlighting the edges of muscle groups up to where they move below another element. So here, for example, that round shape that is really dark. It might be a bit too dark, so I think I'll come back to that and tone it down. But just focusing on that and emphasizing it. Like here, that's super effective for some reason. It's the same that we did with the other Blood Reaver. Yeah, again, just do the trick. Just check from above. Wait, where's my focus? Here it is. Just check from above and see what should be highlighted and what's going to catch light. If you're going for some standard cenital lighting. Okay, now it's time to bring back the green, desaturated green. Before I go back to white for the last highlights. Yeah, unfortunately the camera doesn't quite capture it, but the contrast is really intense, and it should be looking really good just on the table. So yeah, I'm pretty happy so far. Okay, the back of the hand, starting with the knuckles. Let's see. Put in these light dots. Since, like I said, every element here could be treated like a sphere. So just have some light dots. But yeah, so you can see the slight red tint here coming from below. I think I'm going to have a lot of fun with expanding that. But yeah, right now it just shows that a cold green and the red make for an interesting contrast. So either way, I'm going to be playing with that a bit. I want to add, like I said, the red tones that I have down here, or up here, make them a bit more prominent. And yeah, just generally play around a bit more with the reds and the darker tones and all that. Okay, so the base color was something like this. Start here. And the idea is to add some color variation. And intensity of color. And there's two ideas here. First of all, we want to make the red a bit more intense, make it stand out more. And secondly, this is a bit of a darker color, and we're going to add shadows to the areas that are lower on the miniature. We really want the complementary contrast to stand out a bit more. That's why I'm adding more red to these areas. Okay, so let's try this with a bit of sepia, just to have a color tone in there that we also have on other areas. And what to say, this could take some orange variation, just subtly adding more distinguished colors. Like I said, I just want to experiment a bit with some oranges and brown tones. And do it in a bit more of a controlled way, not just glazing or stuff like that. I'm sorry, not just applying a wash, but more of a controlled glaze approach. Kind of torn between leaving that intense or toning it down a bit. That would be kind of awesome if you could treat or work with ZBrush that way. Guess then I would also consider getting into digital. I think that color in the shadows just makes the whole thing a bit more saturized, and but also increases the contrast and just color variation, like I said. I think that's exactly what I'm looking for. Just screwed this up a bit. Scraped away some of that color here. Don't expect too much from them when it comes to anatomy. Okay, just mixing a bit of a darker color for these areas. I don't want the pink to be too prevalent down here. I think it's still a bit too bright. Okay, so I don't want to lose all the green gray, but that whole arm or that whole elbow should be somewhat reddish. Maybe by just re-adding a bit of that Merlin green. can get the shape out again. Also, I feel like the apps should be maybe a bit more covered with the midtone. As they face up. It also brings back some of the green in some areas that maybe got covered too much by the reds. Right, and intensifying these just a bit more. Should make the overall appearance a bit lighter. A lava base, and then depending on how much time I have left, maybe also apply some subtle sky earth. No. Okay, just some weird stuff going on here. I think I want to darken the whole thing a bit. So add some sepia and base color. I mean, the thing is, you shouldn't be. I say that all the time. Don't compare yourself to others. It's kind of useless because you never know. I mean, in my case, you do know that I do this for a lot longer. Yeah, always just aim to be a better you tomorrow. And that should be your baby steps, you know, not trying to be as good as someone else overnight. It's not going to happen, and especially not if they have a lot more experience. And that way you're also not really frustrated with your progress and you can enjoy it. So I'm pretty sure you learned something, and you're going to be able to use it on the next thing you paint. Exactly, just enjoy the time you have with painting. A lot of us spend so much time painting that if the time is not enjoyable, it wouldn't really make sense to continue if it wasn't. Well, I guess I just need to find a good highlight color here. Just gradually adding some layers on top of what we shaded, so to bring back the gradients. It works pretty good if you have, for example, a highlight that was too harsh. Just try to treat the area in the middle like a midtone and work over that. Sort of fill in the missing layers. That usually works pretty good. Here I'm mixing some of the XV88 and the beige red to have a color that is not too far off of the green-gray, but still gives me the opportunity or the possibility to make some elements stand out in the chest muscle. The beige red is part of the base color, and the XV88 adds a bit of a color variation, and you can see the result is contrasty enough to make it stand out. Make this darker. I feel like we are not having enough contrast in some areas. Okay, so I'll be playing around a bit more with that orange-brown contrast. So let's see how it looks if we don't take that red, but go straight for sepia instead. Find the contrast really good here, but the color is not really, it's just a tiny bit too pink. Let's see if that fixes it. Like I said, I just want to bring out the contrast here between the muscle groups. Okay, so I still should probably continue with that contrast, like put it everywhere, like also here. Just to continue down and have that intensity everywhere. But yeah, I need some way to bring everything up a bit more contrast-wise. Maybe if I just start out by adding Yeah, I think I want to intensify these parts over here. And then build a bit of a gradient here. Okay, I think I'm going to add a bit of blue, maybe black, for the low parts. So for these parts down here. Yeah, again to increase contrast even more. So just shading that with blue mixed with the base color, but I think we also need some black in there. And while the other colors like the beige red, the red and the XV88 are meant to also tint the shadows in a more fleshy red way the actual blue, and later the tiny bit of black that I'm going to mix in is supposed to create dark shadows, maximum of contrast. This is just shadows that were naturally cast and that should darken the overall impression. Yeah, but still, I think it still can profit from just shading down here. Just probably have to pull it up a bit more, otherwise it just looks that abrupt. Just want to in general increase the contrast. Just feel it's lacking a bit. Just don't want to lose all the smoothness. Just do a bit of dark lighting now. So up here. I think I can be a bit more daring with putting in the contrast or shadows in some places. Right, so just taking that blue black and putting it in some areas that, so for example below these chest muscles, just add the tiniest bits of shadows, darkness to increase contrast even more. I think that has been a good decision to put in a shadow color into the areas that are shaded with the reds, so that way these areas still get darker but keep the different skin tone. I just wanted to have, you know, maybe a bit of a complementary contrast since there's green in the highlights. I guess that was the motivation. And also I just wanted to start pinkish on the elbow and then move more into an orange and into a blue for the shadows. But the overall, just having like that red in the mid-tone color, it's definitely looking interesting, I think. In this video I'm going to show you...
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers!
right now. Anyway,